Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover the solar yogas, also known as Vesi, Vasi, and Ubhayachari yogas. And again, this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. If you're new to Vedic astrology or Jyotish or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the concept or on the subject are on my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that subject. So if you'd like to learn more about it, get deeper into it. And then if you're looking for similar content to this, I have a whole yogas planetary combinations playlist you can check out if you're interested in learning more yogas beyond this. And other videos to watch before this one or with this one to help you out and get more out of this talk. North, South, and East Indian style charts. I also cover Western style charts in that video. Introduction to navigating a birth chart, the Lagna, also known as the Ascendant, rising sign of first house, natural Malefic and Benefic planets, and then symbolism of the sun. All right. Okay, so what is or are solar yogas? Well, let's talk about yoga first. Yoga, if you're not familiar, means planetary combination. So when you get planets, certain planets in combination with each other or certain houses, that sort of thing, you can get yogas. And these yogas can indicate kind of super effects, excuse me, super effects for a chart. Okay, so they're pretty important with interpretation of the overall chart and what will be outcomes. Now, the thing to note is that there are other yogas involving the sun. For example, Budhaditya yoga, I did a video on that not too long ago, where that's when you get Sun and Mercury in the same sign or a Rashi constellation. So clearly that yoga also involves the sun, but these, when people talk about the solar yogas, they're usually referring to these three that I'm going to be talking about today. Um, so just realize that they're not the only ones, even though they're called the solar yogas. Okay. Okay. So how do we define these yogas, or how do we identify them when we're looking at charts? Well, if we look at the chart on the right here, I have a Gemini rising chart set up, and we know that because the top middle square is the rising sign, ascendant, first house, Lagna, all different names are the same thing. And you can see there's a little 3 in the bottom corner. That little 3 means the third constellation or zodiac sign or Rashi, which is Gemini, so or Mithuna in Sanskrit. So this is a Gemini rising chart, and you can see I put the sun there. Okay. So, what we're looking for is planets that are flanking the sun, meaning that they're in the house before or after the sun. Okay. So, so there are three different solar yogas in this sort of group or package here. So one is Veshi yoga. Okay, so how is Veshi yoga defined? Well, when you find a true planet in the second house or bhava from the sun, but there's no true planet in the 12th house. Okay. So if you don't know, or if you don't remember, the true planets are Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay, Moon is not here because Moon is a moon, and Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon, are not here because they're calculations. They're not planets with mass. They're not considered true planets. Okay. So for Veshi Yoga, you can see the second house from the sun is going to be house up and to the left, where you have that 4 in the bottom corner in this chart. And you can see that yellow circle. So if we're looking for a Veshi yoga, you will find true planets in the second house from the sun, but there will be no planets in the 12th house from the sun. Okay. Now in this chart, if you're familiar with other yogas, you can get yogas from true planets flanking the Lagna. So that might be a little bit confusing, but try to just focus on the sun and what's flanking the sun. So if I move the sun to any other um, house in this chart, you would look the second house from the sun and the 12th house from the sun, not the Lagna. Okay. So, so that's a Veshi yoga. You're looking for a true planet in the house second from the sun. Vashi yoga is the other side. So, true planet in the 12th house or bhava from the sun, but not in the second. Okay. So in this chart, where you see that kind of blue circle in the 12th house from the sun, if you had a true planet, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn there, you would get a Vasi yoga. Now, when you get true planets on both the second and the 12th house or bhava from the sun, you get Ubhayachari yoga. Okay, and that's where you see the two green circles, right? So yellow in the second house and blue in the 12th house. Yellow and blue make green. So when you get planets flanking both sides of the sun, you get a again, true planets from the sun, you get a Ubhayachari yoga. Okay. Now, the thing to, well, I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to get into more detail, but the thing to note is that, especially for yogas and all things in a chart, the stronger a planet is, whether positive or negative, the more it's going to affect the sun and what the sun represents. Okay, which are things like soul, career, purpose, health, right? I mean, big things, fame, leadership. Yeah. So, yeah, so you can see here again, we're looking to the second house or 12th house from the sun, and then making sure it's a true planet. And then as a reminder, because I didn't give too many charts this time, because I thought it was getting too complicated, and I thought this was enough. But yeah, just remember that the strength of the planets flanking will determine how much they're gonna give or influence the sun, what the sun represents. Okay, so now we're gonna refine these original definitions of solar yogas, and we're gonna add in here two qualities, potential qualities. One is papa, the concept of papa or ashub, which means bad or not good, and then shub, which means good, and sounds good. And then there's the concept of mishra, which I don't typically see written or talked about, but you can think about it in your mind, okay? So the definition of the first yoga, Veshi yoga, was a true planet in the second house or bhava from the sun, but not in the 12th, none in the 12th. So when the true planets in the second house from the sun are natural malefics, this is considered a papa Veshi yoga or a bad Veshi yoga. You can think about it simply that way. Now, if the true planets in the second house from the sun are natural benefics, you would get a Shubha Veshi yoga or a good Veshi yoga. Okay. Now, if we move on to the second yoga, so again, we were talking about Vashi yoga here. So, true planet, the definitions, true planets in the 12th house or bhava from the sun, but not on the second. When these are natural malefics in the 12th house from the sun, you would get a Papavashi yoga. When they're natural benefics, you would get a Shubhavashi yoga. Okay, so bad Vashi yoga and then good Vashi yoga. Okay. Then the third one, Upayachari yoga, when there's true planets in both the second and 12th house or bhava from the sun. When these are natural malefics, you get a Papabhayachari yoga. And when they're natural benefics, you get a Shubhayachari yoga. Okay. Now the true planets again, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. And if you don't recall, or know the natural malefics. Now, when I'm talking about natural malefics or benefics here, if you watch my video, there's some planets like Mars and Saturn are always natural malefics, and Venus and Jupiter are always natural benefics, no matter how you interpret them in a chart. Mercury, if you're just evaluating Mercury in the chart, not not within a yoga, can flip. It can sometimes be a natural malefic and sometimes be a natural benefic. When you're evaluating yogas, though, Mercury is always considered a natural benefic. Okay, so keep that in mind. So yeah, so let's take a look at the chart. And I've filled in the other planets here just for fun. So we've still got a Gemini rising chart here. We've got the Sun and the Lagna, the Ascendant rising sign first house. Now, in the second house, let's start there with the Veshi yogas potentially. Do we have true planets in the second house or bhava from the Sun? Yes, we do. Okay, which one? Well, Venus. So Rahu is not considered a true planet. So Venus is there. So we have the potential for a Veshi yoga. Now, is Venus a natural malefic or natural benefic? It's a natural benefic. So we potentially have a Subha Veshi yoga here. But to complete this definition, there should not be a true planet in the 12th house. Do we have any true planets in the 12th house here? Yes, we do. We have Jupiter and Mercury. So this is not a Shubha Veshi yoga in this chart. Okay. Then true planet in the 12th house bhava or bhava from the sun, but not in the second. Well, no, we don't have this, right? Because we have a true planet. We've already seen we have a true planet Venus in the second house. But if we didn't have a Venus in the second house, potentially we have Jupiter and Mercury in the 12th house. Okay, so are they natural malefics or natural benefics? Well, they're both natural benefics. So this chart potentially is a Shubha Vashi yoga, but that's not true because, or that's not the case here because Venus is in the second house. We have a true planet in the second house also. Now, what about the third one? Are there true planets in both the second house and the 12th house or above from the sun? Yes, this is true. Okay. Now, are they predominantly natural malefics or natural benefics? Well, we have Rahu there, which is a natural malefic, but we're not, when we're looking exclusively at this yoga, you don't want to be, just as a first pass, you don't want to consider Rahu. I mean, you do want to consider Rahu, once you've established that there is a yoga here. But Rahu does not generate or create a yoga here. Okay, so you just want to be clear that there's a yoga here first, and then you can start playing with, what planets are affecting, this, that, or whatever. Okay, so we do have true planets in the second house and the 12th house, and they're all natural benefics. So this chart has a Ubhayachari yoga in it. Okay. Even though the Rahu's there, the Rahu will change, how Venus acts a little bit, bring Venus down because Venus is a natural benefic and Rahu's a natural malefic. It'll bring that down and also make it a little erratic because Rahu's a little bit erratic or hidden. But still, I would still consider this a Shubhayachari yoga in this chart. Okay, now once you've established that there's yoga, what else is going on? What's affecting what? Well, you do have Mars aspecting Sun. That's not going to change the yoga, but it is going to make Sun more fiery for sure, because those are both fire planets. You do also have Saturn aspecting, a very strong exalted Saturn aspecting Venus. So actually, even though Venus is a benefic and it's in the second house, and it does create a Shubhayachari yoga with Jupiter and Mercury in the 12th house. You have Rahu and natural malefic on Venus, and you have a really strong Saturn also aspecting Venus. So that's going to drag Venus down. And so that means that Venus, like when you are running a Venus period, for example, Venus wouldn't be able to give as much as the potential of this yoga would give. Yeah, because if Venus was just there and Rahu wasn't there and Saturn wasn't aspecting, Venus could potentially give a little bit more, especially if we had a different base chart and Venus was in Pisces where it was exalted, or Venus was in its own sign of Taurus or Libra where it was exalted. When you ran the planet, the Dasha, the planetary period of Venus, it would give a really strong boost to the sun, potentially. The other thing is that, again, I don't have degrees here, but Venus and Mercury are never more than one house away from the sun. Okay, so they're either with the sun before or after the sun. So you can get, quite a few of these solar yogas, but then again, you have to determine the quality of these planets and the strength of these planets. So maybe if Venus was combust, that would give less also. So you got to consider these things as well. And the other thing to, again, getting back to way back when, back in the day, thousands of years ago, before calculations and stuff, were done. I mean, the first beginnings of Vedic astrology were about just what do you see in the sky. So with the sun, because it's so strong, as a light, these other planets, they're gonna reflect a lot more light. They're gonna be brighter if they're not combust. If they're very close to the sun, they'll be combust because the sun will just you won't be able to see them because they're too close. But if they're just outside of that perimeter of the sun, usually about 10 degrees or so, um, then they're going to be brighter because there's going to be more of the sun's light reflecting off of them. So Venus is going to be quite bright. Mercury is going to be quite bright. Whatever's close to it, Saturn, is never super bright because it's so far, but it'll be brighter. because it's closer to the sun. And so you got to think about that too, is that, anything that like attracts your attention in terms of having more light typically is gives strength. But again, you have to consider whether those planets, again, true planets, are natural malefics or benefics to see which way these planets are going to affect the sun. Because you can kind of think of it as, if the sun represents things, of the many things sun represents, it represents like the president or the king. So you can almost think of it as like court members, these people or planets who sit, just next to the king. Are these people and advisors and comrades or whatever companions, are they positive and uplifting to the king, or are they malevolent and backstabbing and cheating and spying, and whispering negative things and negatively affecting the king, that sort of thing. You can kind of think about it that way. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. So now we've got the three yogas: Veshi yoga, Vashi yoga, and Ubhayachari yoga, and then you further refine them by whether the true planets are natural malefics or benefics. Okay, so then moving on. Okay, so what does this all potentially mean? So if we're going to do interpretation of these, so we find the solar yogas, and then how do we interpret them, add them to clarify what's going on in the chart? Well, these outcomes are from that I've listed here in this slide are from the Phaladipika, chapter 6, and they follow along with the Papa Shubha clarification, so the good, bad yoga clarification. In the translation that I have, they don't use Papa, they use Ashub. So Ashub is like not good, which is the same as, in translation more or less as Pop. So anyway, you might see it written a little bit differently, but just be aware. So what happens if we have these like Veshi yogas? Like what will happen? So again, the Veshi yoga is when there's a true planet in the second house, or Bhava from the sun. So Papa Veshi or Ashubha Veshi yoga will give indications that the person may unfairly defame others, may not be beautiful, and may move in the company of low and wicked people. Now, if we think about the second house, this can make a lot of sense. So one, the second house represents speech, oral communication. So if we have negative, planets in the second house, then you can assume that the way this person speaks or what this person speaks about is not going to be very high-minded necessarily. And the second house represents basically the person from kind of the neck up. So, physically. So, like, are they found to be attractive or not, at least in the face? Um, and the second house also represents family as well as the inner circle. So again, that's kind of gets back to that analogy I was giving of, again, the sun representing the king or the president, head of state, and, who are the people that are surrounding them? Are they reliable and truthful and good and creating positive influence, or are they backstabbing and trying to poison the president and grab power for themselves? A lot of nasty stuff can be going on. So then in contrast, if we have a Shubha Veshi yoga, so again, we have now malefic, benefic planets in the second house from the sun. Now the person would kind of have opposite qualities. Somebody who would be very good looking, somebody who would be happy, somebody who would be meritorious, somebody who would be valiant, a king, and virtuous. So again, mostly good qualities here. And so like happy and valiant and virtuous, like meritorious, like why would that, potentially be? Now again, if we think about the symbolism of the second house, because it represents family, inner circle, it also represents like our early childhood years. So when we have a lot of positive people, uplifting, positive, benevolent people around us in our childhood years, then this could, usually this tends to, rub off on the native of the chart. So it will uplift their mind and give them more of a positive outlook, generally speaking. Okay. Now, if we move on to the second group here of the Vashi yogas, so again, this is a true planet in the 12th house or Bhava from the sun, but not in the second. If we have a Papa Vashi yoga, so again, negative, natural malefic planets in the 12th house from the sun, then we get dishonesty, harsh or abusive in speech, again, associating with wicked people. So this is still like in some ways a reflection of, to me, a reflection of the second house, like speech and dishonesty and associating with wicked people or any kind of person. Like again, I would still be thinking second house, even though we're talking about 12th house here. So that was a little surprising to me when I lined these all up, when I really started thinking about it. It's not like we're getting, with these Vashi yogas in the 12th house, it's not like we're getting like, oh, um, will incur many losses or will be renowned overseas or internationally or something like that. But, there can be. So then we have Shubhavashi yoga here. So we do get renowned. We do get dear to all, rich and prosperous. So, again, to me, this is more a reflection of the second house because the second house represents things like wealth and assets. So if you have, um, natural benefic planets in the second house, I would assume these things. I wouldn't necessarily assume these things if they're in the 12th house. So keep that in mind. But there will potentially be something coming from the 12th house and 12th house issues. So just, again, you always have to do your own research. I'm presenting this, from classical text, but, if you have a bunch of charts and you see that, there are all these positive planets, true planets in the 12th house, and, again, and, maybe they've lost all their money. I mean, maybe those positive or natural benefics are, the lord of the second house of assets or the 11th house of income and maybe they're combats, like I said, Venus and Mercury. I mean, these planets can be pretty close to the sun. So you got to consider all that as well. So this is just, again, like another layer of interpretation. All right, so you got Papavashi and Shubhavashi there. Now the third one, the Ubhayachari yogas. So again, when true planets are in both the second and 12th house or Bhava from the sun. So the Papa version, the Papa Ubhayachari, I can't say it's too much for me. Papayachari version, so the negative version of the Ubhayachari yogas. So someone who will suffer mentally from public dishonor and be devoid of wealth and fortune. So if you have negative planets on both sides of the sun, like it all comes crashing down. Like your people, energies surrounding the king or the soul are not positive and uplifting and supportive. Think about it that way. And then the positive version here is Subhayachari yoga. So we have an attractive body, soft spoken, delights the world, eloquent, renowned, and wealthy. So we get all the goodies here. So again, if the sun is surrounded by all these benefic planets, like you've got, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, like in this chart, the only thing kind of bringing again this chart down is like we've got Rahu on Venus and this exalted Saturn on Venus, so that'll bring so they may not get these goodies during the Venus period. They may potentially more likely get those goodies during Jupiter Mercury period if they run them. Okay. Now, also, this kind of additional Papa Shubh, good and bad yogas clarification came from the Faladipika. So that's important to note. Okay, now I have one more slide here to kind of be complete with all of this. So this slide is the Solar Yoga's interpretation, but this is outcomes from the BPH, so Brihad Parashara Hora. So this is an older text than the Faladipika, and they have chapter 40 is the Solar Yoga chapter, but they don't write very much. There's only a couple paragraphs in here, and they don't distinguish between Shubh and Papa. So that came along with the Faladipika, which was a later text or Shastra. Okay, but this is what they write, which is a little bit sort of similar, but sort of different. So let's just take a look at it so you can, because again, this was like the older version, kind of seed version for what was in Faladipika. So the first one, so the Veshi yoga, so a true planet in the second house or bhava from the sun, not in the 12th. So the definition's the same, but the outcome's a little bit different. So, and they're not distinguishing between natural, benefic, or malefic. So are we talking about Saturn here? Are we talking about Jupiter here? Those will give you very different results based on just the natural qualities of the planet. So if you do have a true planet in the second house, you're getting somebody who's even-sighted, which I'm not exactly sure what that means, but maybe like balanced in thought or has good eyesight. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but this kind of makes sense because the second house can represent eyesight because we're talking about things from the neck up. Truthful, so again, speech, long-bodied. Not really sure where that comes from. Maybe if you have Saturn here, because Saturn can usually give people who are actually very tall and very short, because we have, again, a mixed bag here, as you can see, of quality. So then there's like lazy. So I would, maybe Saturn, I would think. Happy or little wealth. Well, again, some of these I would think Jupiter, and some of these I would think Saturn, which is Jupiter is the great benefic, and Saturn is the great malefic. So you have this mixed bag of qualities here. So that's why it's nice, I think, the Phala because when you start, slotting these yogas into, well, are they mostly natural benefics around the sun or mostly natural malefics, whether in the second or 12th house, then you start to see which way this will go rather than like, well, it might be all of this, which is true. I mean, because you might have a Mishra situation where you have both the natural malefics and natural benefics, and then you would get this kind of mixed bag situation. Yeah, Mishra, right? So, and the second yoga here, so this is the Vasi yoga, true planet in the 12th house or Baba from the sun on the second. So, skillful, charitable, fame, learning, and strength. So, these are mostly positive here. If you had Saturn or Mars, and depending on what lords, what houses they lord over or own, this might change. So again, this I'm just including it for you for people who like to study Shastra. So at least there was some beginning, some seed of this solar yoga's idea, but it wasn't as fully developed. And then the third one, the Ubhayachari yoga. So, true planet in both second and 12th house or Baba from the sun. So, be a king or equal to a king in happiness. So, this makes sense if they're mostly, positive, natural benefics, right? Because you have all this positive energy around the sun, the king, the, leader. But I don't know if that would be true if you just had like, well, you'd have to have Venus and you'd have to have Mercury. Those, well, they might be in the same house as Sun. So if you had Venus and Mercury with the Sun, and then like you'd have to have Mars in second or 12, and then Saturn in second 12. That would drag, I think, sundown potentially. Yeah. So yeah. So there you go. So you have the whole story now on that. Okay. So as always, I want to thank you for stopping by and listening to one of my talks. I appreciate your time and interest as well, and all of the support you guys give the channel. So liking videos and subscribing to the channel and comments, questions, and offering donations and things like that. All of it's supportive to my work on the channel and developing the channel. So it's all appreciated. Thank you for that. I do offer personal birth chart readings. I do those live on Zoom as pre-recorded video. So if that's of interest to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com if you'd like more information about that. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda or traditional Indian medicine, yoga, and other paradigms of natural medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. So all of that is available on my other channel, Nature Source Care. So that's out there if that's interesting to you. And as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, you take care. Namaste.